Welcome to the digital studio here at Cape Town Conversation. Our conversation today is going to be about great power politics and the new geopolitical situation we find ourselves in. To have this conversation, we've got Velina Tchakarova, who is a geopolitical expert, and we got Ambassador Amni Mpungwe, who is a former ambassador in Tanzania. So I'm going to start a little bit and ask you to help us get an idea of what are the global threats that we're facing today with the reemergence of great power politics. So I'm going to start with you, Velina.
Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. Now, we are in the middle of a very big transformational period in international relations, where on the one hand we see how the big players, namely United States, China and Russia, are not eager to change. They want to preserve or transform the global order in their own interest. At the same time, we see fluid regional formations. A lot is going on actually at the regional arena, whereas most of the key players are trying to somehow navigate and oscillate between these two global centers of power. My biggest fear is that we might slide into something that I call bifurcation of the global system. That means a Cold War 2.0 context, very different one from the first, but still Cold War 2.0 context between United States on the one hand and China and Russia on the other hand. Of course, that means a number of new low-intensity conflicts. This is the biggest risk I see in this, let's say, decade and probably the next decade. A lot of low-intensity conflicts going on for years, not only the one in Ukraine or in the Middle East, but mostly also in South China Sea with the Taiwan issue. North Korea will be also activated. So a lot of these kind of activities, next to also more terrorist activities, because in most corners of the world we will see a huge number of, let's say, military conflicts and different kind of, non-state actors also becoming active.
Thank you for that. Ambassador, what is your perspective on this?
I think the world has gone, especially for us in Africa here, it's total confusion because, as you know, at the height of Cold War, there was a lot of instability in Africa. There were a lot of coups, Cold War-sponsored coups all over the continent. And when, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the end of which marked the end of the Cold War, a lot of us in Africa had expected now there is a period of calm and, we can revive our economies. A lot of our economies were quite devastated as a result of those tensions and other political factors that were associated with those Cold War tensions. That end of Cold War also brought in some other forces like globalization. Global economies were integrating very fast. The global production, distribution, and exchange processes were being integrated. A lot of national boundaries were collapsing, turning into markets. There have been some emphasis of universal values of democracy, of human rights, of rule of law, of good governance, and we thought that would provide opportunities for growth and economic development. And right then, there was also renewed concern and care for environment, which has taken a lot of steps now for sustainable development. And we also noticed the developments in information and telecommunication technologies, which will bring time, space, and distance completely relevant in pushing for socio-economic agenda. So there was a lot of hope. So when you see that these tensions are still continuing in a more intensified way, it puts us in a very difficult situation.
So what I'm hearing is this Cold War 2.0 that Velina is talking about, that you see kind of emerging some of the tensions in Africa.
Certainly, because what I see, I think there's, among the powers, and a certain section of the global powers, they're still stuck in the past. You know, those Cold War rivalries are being sustained. I think there've been shifts in those rivalries, but they don't. I mean, there's a failure to realize it, but also there's a failure to accept that there's a need for a new global security architecture. That the old one that propelled or had prevailed during Cold War is no longer relevant now. We need a new architecture for global peace and security that is much more inclusive than what it was before.
And could you expand on that, and how can the Global South play a role, and in Africa in particular, in this kind of re-architecture that you discussed?
Yeah, certainly the previous architecture, just limited power to some few nations. It was not inclusive. It was not, there's no diversity in that. But I think, since there are no ideological differences that we witnessed during the Cold War, now I think we should focus on what the post-Cold War has brought to the world, the integration of the economies and science and technology, and now we are going through the fourth industrial revolution. The digitalization process should bring more collaboration than differences. But the problem here that it looks like there are certain powers which are still stuck in the past, want to sustain what used to divide everybody. And this is the crux of the problem.
Well, Velina, could we continue on the fourth industrial revolution? What do you think, thinking of all the new technologies that exist and looking to the global south, not only in Africa, but the whole global south, how do you think that they can respond to this new kind of global power politics that's happening?
Well, the most important thing is to really make sure that the global south, as a collective player representing Latin America, Africa, and also a large part of Asia, gets its own agency in the process. This is the big difference. That's why I also agree with the ambassador that here there should be a different narrative. And the agency means how to capitalize on the good side of globalization, because those global powers right now, they want to disentangle, they want to deglobalize in certain way, because they want to create different centrifugal centers of power, and this is detrimental to the interests of the global south. So regionalization, globalization with different character, that means globalization that is steered bottom up by those countries that want to catch up, that have not capitalized on the previous waves of the three former industrial revolutions. The digitalization was mentioned. Here we see a lot of also demand for new structures, digital structures, energy structures, and also structures that use the progress of the fourth industrial revolution. So that means that there should not be only two answers presented by the one side or the other side, but there should be a third way, and that is the way how the global south sees it fitting to its own needs. So agency, representation, adequate and fair representation. So we will see a lot of new structures and new formats and new organizations coming out in this and the next decade, where the West will not be represented, or also China and Russia will not be represented, where other regional powers will be more or less represented.
So you talk about the deglobalization. Perhaps there's an opportunity here with technological independence, platforms. Do you think that perhaps this could create some form of solidarity, that technology can be leveraged in this kind of deglobalization aspect? I'll start with you.
Yeah, certainly, technology, the platform provides for collaboration, and I think it is an imperative, because the developments in the disruptive technologies that are coming up, and they are accelerating in a very fast speed. There's no way you can isolate different parts of the world. They're essentially very inclusive, just as they're diverse. So I think whatever it is that causes some resistance at certain parts of the world, I think at the end of the day, it will be irresistible. The universal coverage of these technologies and bringing everybody into the same room, so to speak, is inevitable.
That sounds hopeful. Velina, could you continue that, but also talk about digital currencies and your thoughts on how that could play into the global power politics?
In my view, we will see the biggest transformation happening in this decade when it comes to, for instance, global financial and monetary system, out of necessity, as the ambassador also pointed out. So it's an irreversible process. And that means, of course, new digital structures that enable national currencies. Probably we will see new currency mechanisms, how states can actually trade while avoiding let's say, dominant position of a single national currency. I don't want to go into the detail that right now we have already a competition between, on the one hand, the US dollar as a dominant currency, and then other, let's say, other projects. So BRICS probably will be in the lead here, but we will see this also being transferred to the G20 format, where, as I said, it's not so much as a reaction to the dominant position of a single national currency, but it's really out of necessity to avoid being too dependent on a very strong currency in times of crises. Because right now, these are really transitional crises, and in this period, states will have to come up with new solutions. So we will see probably this digital, more states will go for the solution of digital currencies, but we will see also probably a different currency mechanism to operate with, within these regional formats.
So you're talking about a lot of transition happening. I'd like to close with some thoughts around what governments in the Global South should do and what businesses in the Global South should do to posture themselves for this geopolitical volatility. Start with you.
Yeah, certainly, especially as in Africa settling in the South, there's nobody who's going to help us, to take us out of this quagmire. I think the solidarity should be intensified, and really unity. It is only in the strength of unity that we can have a say in the new global architecture for peace and security. Unless we solidify our position as South, and this process has started many years ago. I think it's time to intensify now and be able to play a very important role for the new architecture for global peace and stability. Before even we get into other complications, we were talking about geopolitics, and then I'm hearing people starting talking about astropolitics. So we'll be looking for countries like India now that are also in the space to take us through, first initially in this geopolitics, and then astropolitics. I think they'll also be able to deliver us into those kind of conversations and participation.
And Velina, could you tell us what you think about what businesses should do and what countries should do in the Global South to posture?
Well, I agree with the ambassador first and foremost. This is a very different era where we will have also 4 domains, not 3 domains of warfare, including the cyber domain, and that's why it's so important to not allow that the competition in the digital sphere, and specifically amid the 4th industrial revolution, is really linked only to United States and China, which are now the dominant powers. I think that the most important and key word is actually inclusion, because societies can really have big leverage this time in the Global South. A lot of this digitalization is only possible because of the next generations, which can have the technological skills, the competences to guide states through these processes, through these transformational processes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation about geopolitics and the tumultuous path forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.